One of the biggest selling points of the Dune saga is the Sandworms of Arrakis. These humongous creatures are central to the story because they create the most important resource in the universe on the most dangerous planet in the universe. It's not an exaggeration to say that sandworms shaped Arrakis and Fremen culture, because they did, in more ways than one. And one of the crucial facts about a sandworm's life cycle is its aversion to moisture. But what if there was a version of them that did not treat water like a life-threatening poison? What if sandworms could swim in actual oceans, and not just the dunes of Dune? Well, believe it or not, such worms do exist, but you might not have heard of them on account of them being a part of the later Dune novels. So in this video, we will introduce you to the elusive Seaworms and their versions of spice, which is a lot more potent, and therefore a lot deadlier than regular spice. So without further ado, this is Seaworms and Ultraspice Explained. How did seaworms come into existence? Seaworms aren't a natural species of creatures. In fact, the only kind of worms we ever hear about in the Dune saga are the sandworms, and like we mentioned in the intro, they hate water. The life of a sandworm begins as a sand trout. These small entities are covered in cilia, and they don't hate water nearly as much as their metamorphosed counterparts. In fact, sand trout needs water to grow into sandworms, for a sandworm is actually a composite being. Many individual sand trout converge on a water source and link their cilia together to drink it entirely. When that is done, the mass of sand trout begins to turn into a little maker, aka a young sandworm. If these young sandworms are lucky enough, they survive the extreme conditions of life on Arrakis and turn into the giant makers that are called Shai Hulud by the Fremen. It's only after this transformation into a maker is completed that a sandworm becomes vulnerable to water. The reason for this is never quite explained, but we've seen what happens when a sandworm touches water in the series, mainly through the God Emperor, Leto II. In God Emperor of Dune, Leto takes one of his distant descendants into his private desert and turns off the weather devices that maintain it. This causes rain to fall on his skin, and his descendant, who is also part of a resistance movement that wants to kill him, realizes that water is fatal for a sandworm. Because of their highly aggressive nature, attempts to capture sandworms almost always end in disaster, and the Fremen never tried such a thing because they worshipped these creatures as an aspect of God. It's only after their society collapses and vanishes from the cosmos that sandworms start getting captured by other groups. Most notably, the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood and the Bene Tleilax, aka the Tleilaxu. Now, you might be asking yourself, if seaworms aren't a naturally occurring species of creatures, then how in the world did they come into existence? Well, for that, you have the latter to thank. In the final two Dune novels, written by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, it's revealed that the Tleilaxu, Mushek Waf, got his hands on a few sandworms despite Arrakis' obliteration. With these sandworms, he tried out two methods of proliferation, because the Tleilaxu faith is actually quite similar to Fremen beliefs. The Tleilaxu follow a sect of Buddhism called Zen Sufism, and they recognized Leto II as their prophet, starting from Frank Herbert's Heretics of Dune. Tleilaxu society is built upon hardline beliefs about gender and genetic engineering, which is where the seaworms come into play. They've spent millennia perfecting the art of altering one's gene code down to the individual strands of DNA, for the Tleilaxu consider genes to be the language of God, and themselves its only true interpreters. They have created an entire slave race called the Face Dancers, genetically altered Tleilaxu who possess the power to change their appearance into another's on a genetic level. They've taken artificial birthing to a disgusting extreme, turning their women into breeding machines, into whom they can plant mere cells from a person and recreate their entire body. Even the leaders of Tleilaxu society have become so far removed from humans that they appear to be alien, and this is in a society that exists among the stars. In Heretics of Dune and Chapter House Dune, Frank's final 2 novels from the original series, we meet the Tleilaxu's supreme leader, Tilwith, whose goal is to ensure that his people become the rulers of the entire universe. When Tleilax is destroyed by the Honored Matres and their entire society extinguished, only 2 of its members survive. Scytale, whom you will meet real soon in Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 3, and Waf, who takes it upon himself to bring God back from extinction in an effort to destroy the Matres and avenge his people. He collaborates with Guild Navigator Edric, who also needs an alternate source of spice because at some point in time, Arrakis had been destroyed and the sandworms were believed to be dead. Edric wanted the artificial way to create melange, which the Tleilaxu had perfected, but Waf proved ineffective in that regard. That's because the version of him that Edric approaches for the job is imperfect. Tleilaxu genetics don't just create new life from pre-existing cells. They also transfer memories into the bodies of those that are recreated. A Tleilaxu Gola is a blank slate when it is born, but it can have its memories awakened by undergoing severe trauma. Waf used that method to stay alive for centuries, but his final awakening was botched. This resulted in him only partially awakening, and not having any memory of how to synthesize melange. So instead of trying to recall that lost secret, he took a different path to make the spice flow again. Waf entered a highly secretive Navigation Guild laboratory aboard one of their highliners where he created 2 different sets of worms. The first was the regular sandworm, whose outer body was turned into armor via genetic manipulation. These sandworms proved to be a failure because when Waf took them back to irradiated Arrakis to try and reawaken his prophet, they died soon after burrowing into the ground. His second set of worms proved to be a success, and if you've been following everything so far, then you know we're talking about the Seaworms. Waf took the specimen that he had in his possession and altered its gene code in such a way that instead of making it implode upon contact, water no longer affected it. He essentially removed the sandworm's greatest nerf and turned it into a habitat for them, for the new species he'd created were capable of swimming in sea. In fact, they needed to be in water to grow in the first place, which is a complete inversion of the traditional sandworm life cycle. Sand trout devour water to the point of turning it into a precious resource. Seaworms don't just drink the water to grow, they live in it, depend on it, and so they're completely different from their evolutionary ancestors. We can't even call them an evolution of sandworms in the proper sense of the term, because they were engineered to be that way. And after Waf created his first few specimens, he let them loose in the ocean world called Buzzle, where they proceeded to wreck the natural ecosystem. Buzzle was a planet populated by massive mussels called colosters. These creatures produced a gem called Soustone, which was like a space pearl, only more beautiful and expensive than actual pearls, and purportedly possessed of mind-altering abilities. Soustones were a pretty good source of money, especially from the black market, and colosters are the only species known to produce them. When the Honored Matres attacked the Old Imperium, they brought genetically altered humanoids of their own called Phibians. These half-man, half-fish creatures entered the oceans of Buzzle and helped the Matres harvest Soustones like the scythe reaps wheat. But when the Seaworms arrived, both colosters and Phibians were driven to near extinction because of their monstrous size and power. Seaworms are just as dangerous as sandworms, you see, and because they live in water, they have a much better chance at catching and devouring prey without trying to sense where they are through vibration. In many ways, the Seaworms look exactly like sandworms, except they're not, and this is proved by the substance they produce. What is Ultraspice? How is it different from spice melange? For the longest time, the source of the spice melange was unknown. What we mean by that is that people knew it came from the great sandworm, but no one understood just how it was produced. Well, we gotta look at that thanks to Waf and his Seaworms, because once they took root in the oceans of Buzzle, they grew large enough to be harvested. After allowing the Seaworms to grow for a few years, Waf visited Buzzle with a group of guild researchers. Together, they managed to capture a seaworm and bring it to the shore of a beach on Buzzle. Water is lethal to sandworms because their natural habitat is a desert, so it only stands to reason that land would be lethal to a seaworm, seeing as their natural habitat is the sea. Once the seaworm in their possession died, Waff and his researchers cut it open, and what they found was quite extraordinary. In the creature's liver, there was a mass of the most potent prescient drug in the universe, even more so than the spice we know of. This concentrated version of spice was so powerful that Waff and his researchers decided to call it Ultraspice, aka the ultimate spice melange. They never got the chance to test it on themselves because it was stolen from them almost as soon as they retrieved it. Turns out, the Spacing Guild had been infiltrated by the enhanced face dancers who served humanity's greatest enemy, the thinking machines. These face dancers killed most of the navigators in charge of protecting and studying the Ultraspice, and the reason they needed to analyze it in the first place was quite simple. The Spacing Guild had experience with using spice derivatives in the past, but those derivatives were as useless as they were dangerous. One of those derivatives, called Amal, had been created by the Tleilaxu using Ixian technology, and it was so unreliable that instead of boosting a navigator's ability to fold space, it drove them insane and essentially killed every person on their highliner. And Ultraspice is no different, because the only time we see it being used, it sends its user into such a frenzied state that they overdosed on it. Using regular spice itself is a gamble for those who possess the power of prescience. Spice is ingested in small quantities by such people because it's highly addictive, and high doses of it could lead to reactions that they might not be able to contain. The previously known purest version of spice was the Water of Life, which was extracted from little makers by submerging them in water and essentially killing them. The only people who can survive the agony it produces are the Bene Gesserit, and even then, the process is hit or miss. Bene Gesserit sisters possess the ability to change their internal biochemistry through sheer willpower. The Water of Life ritual requires them to neutralize the highly poisonous nature of the substance, and those that manage to do so gain the powers of prescience and other memory. Only a select few individuals have been able to do this, and that too after undergoing such pain that it changes their whole personality once they survived it. But the Ultraspice is like the Water of Life amplified 1,000,000 times. It's like a drug whose effects are life-threatening and irreversible. In the final two Dune saga novels written by Brian and Kevin, which were Hunters of Dune and Sandworms of Dune, only one character takes the Ultraspice. And that character is an Eva Gola of Paul Atreides, whom the thinking machines had named Paulo. In the climactic sequences of events of the battle between humanity and thinking machines, the rulers of the latter group, Ominous and Erasmus, declare that a duel must take place. There Paulo would face one of the inhabitants of the Ithaca in an effort to find the ultimate Kwisatz Haderach, and the winner would be given the Ultraspice as their reward. Paulo wins the duel and proceeds to take huge amounts of Ultraspice, and while it unlocks his prescient eye and makes him the most powerful oracle in the history of Dune, it also seals his fate. Because the Ultraspice is far more potent than regular spice, it requires advanced Bene Gesserit skills to neutralize. Skills Paulo simply did not possess. He ended up falling into a permanent trance and died due to starvation. Because this took place in Sandworms of Dune, the final official novel of the Dune saga, we never hear of the Ultraspice being used again. And perhaps that's for the best. If a single use of it can do something so terrible as putting one in a permanent coma-like state, then it's better to avoid obtaining such power, seeing as the cost is simply too high. But this brings us to the final question of this video. Did Seaworms survive Kralizec? The war between humanity and the thinking machines spanned across the entire known universe. Many of the planets that we've come to know, like Arrakis, Gaidi Prime, Lampetus, Tleilax, were all destroyed in the course because of it. Some of those planets were annihilated before the thinking machines' continued existence was revealed, but their destruction was nonetheless a fact. Buzzle, however, survived, since by the time it became relevant, things were moving at too fast a pace. Consequently, the Seaworms continue to exist to this day, but we doubt anyone will go after them for the gifts they offer, seeing as what happened to Paulo will happen to anyone stupid enough to try Ultraspice, while universal peace was achieved through the integration of the thinking machines within human society in a tactful manner that did nothing to eliminate the existence of seaworms. And with humans moving away from spice use by the end of the saga, there's no reason to eliminate them either. Now, the seaworms exist as an endemic species and a permanent warning with regards to what happens when you try to toy with nature, genetically and ecologically. And perhaps that's for the best, because spice itself was such a dangerous commodity, and it was nowhere as strong as Ultraspice. Marvelous verdict. And that's it for this one. Seaworms and Ultraspice are often considered semi-canonical by Dune fans because they were created by Brian and Kevin, but they are nonetheless interesting. We hope you found their story to be as compelling as we did, and even if you didn't, we want to hear your thoughts on them anyway. So let us know in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Marvelous Videos for more breakdowns of Dune lore. We'll see you guys in the next one, so stay safe and take care to not sign up for experimental gene therapy programs, because you never know how you'll come out of it on the other side.